Second language use and second language learning, performance perspective and psycholinguistics. Now, if we want to focus on the performance perspective of language, that is not on the competence, that is the knowledge stored about a language in the learner's mind, and we want to see through their language use how second language is learned. Another way to look at it is from the perspective of interactions. So theories can be divided in how they look at interactions of the learners. Now, what is an interaction? By interaction, we mean that the use of second language in real life situations or in contexts where there is an exchange of ideas. So this integration is integral to second language learning, because in any case the second language learned is to be used, or the purpose of its use is the exchange of ideas. So there are two major perspectives from which we can understand interactions or see how different interactions or different types of interactions between different speakers can lead to language learning. So the first perspective is the psycholinguistic perspective, again, which is looking at the psychological processes of language input in the mind. And the second perspective is socio-linguistic perspective, which is looking at the context of interactions that take place in second language. In psycholinguistic perspective, if we just look at that for the moment, interaction offers opportunities to the learners to fine-tune the input. That is, when somebody is talking to them, the learners have this opportunity to ask questions or to ask for clarifications, and by asking these questions or by asking these clarifications, they are able to fine-tune the input which they can make comprehensible. So if someone is speaking to them and ask them certain things, they, in the process of this negotiation of meaning and the way they interact with it, they are able to fine-tune or simplify the information that comes to them. So the input which might not be comprehensible in the first instance becomes comprehensible, and the learner is able to use it for second language learning. So this is done because the language input then is adapted to the needs of the learner, and the learner himself or herself is involved in fine-tuning this language input. The point in psycholinguistic perspective is that when the second language learners are talking to the native speakers, or if we think about our own classroom context, that if the students are talking to a teacher, this talk should be more or less open-ended. That is, it should enable or leave the space for interaction for the learners, so they are able to ask for clarifications, they are able to interact, and this interaction should be stretched a little bit so that the language learning can take place. For instance, it will not help if the teachers are only giving instructions and expecting the students to follow them without questioning them. Rather, insert this. If we look at interactions from psycholinguistic perspective, and if we want the whole process to be inducive to the learning of second language, we expect the teacher to involve the learners in decision making, because in this decision making the learners will be able to use language and to ask for clarifications, which is very important to adapt the language input that is coming to them. Over here, I must say that the assumption is that the teacher is talking in English, because that is only which is going to help them learn the second language. So we say that in this context where the teacher speaks in English and the students have the opportunity to interact with them, it will be very conducive for the learning of the second language. So discussions in classroom in which the students can talk to each other and the teacher herself or himself will be very conducive from the psycholinguistic perspective. So the psycholinguistic perspective says that comprehensible input is actually something which is arrived at by the involvement of the learners, and one should not simply assume that the input that is coming from the native speaker or from the teacher, if we think of formal classrooms, that it would automatically enable the learner to learn the language. Rather, it should open up the space for negotiation of meaning. And this has led to a lot of research which has been inspired by Krashen's concept of input hypothesis. Let me remind you that Krashen argued that if second language learning has to be a success, then the learners have to understand the language or the second language that is being spoken to them.